Welcome to Commons Conversations, a summer series of interviews with campaigners sharing their experiences and insights into activism, learning in movements, radical history, and more. The program is broadcast by Community Radio 3CR and produced by the Commons Social Change Library, a website containing over 1,500 resources for campaigners, which can be accessed for free at commonslibrary.org. In this week's episode, we bring you a conversation between Tarneen Onus-Browne and Noura Mansour that was held in late 2024. Tarneen is a proud Gunditjmara, Yorta Yorta person through their mother, and Bindal and Meriam person through their father, and they live on the unceded land of the Wurundjeri peoples. Tarneen is a community organising lead at Australian Progress and a community organiser for Warriors of the Aboriginal Resistance, working on Invasion Day, Black Deaths in Custody, and Black Lives Matter. They're also a writer and filmmaker. Noura Mansour is a Palestinian educator, political analyst, writer, activist, and community organiser. She was previously a campaigner at the Australian Palestinian Advocacy Network and is currently the National Director of Democracy in Colour. In this conversation, the pair discuss solidarity between First Nations and Palestinian communities in Australia, highlighting the resilience and strength derived from resistance to shared experiences of genocide and settler colonialism.
Thank you, Noura, for agreeing to do this interview with me. I'm really excited to have a yarn to you about Black and Palestinian solidarity and I guess like what's keeping you strong in these moments as well. And it's been, a really rough 14 months. And I think that it's good to slow down and have yarns together. And I know that we have yarns together anyway, but it's nice to put something out in the world as well.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tarneen. I think there's nothing else that I'd rather be talking about other than, Indigenous solidarity and especially solidarity between Palestinians and First Nation people on this continent. So it's a topic that I feel closely, I feel strongly, and I hold close to my heart. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's been over a year since the genocide of Palestinians has been exacerbated. And I say that because we know it didn't start in October last year. It's been going on since the first Nakba. And you've been really doing so much work around this for a long time, but particularly, in the last year as well. And I really want to know what's given you strength in these moments and what are you most proud of?
Well, that's a great question. We often talk about the workload and the struggle and the fight and the challenges, and I think it's important to stop and think about also what gives us power and energy and what inspires us to keep going. It's been look, the last 14 months have been like nothing I've experienced before, nor I think anything that any Palestinian, including Nakba survivors, like I think about my grandparents' story and their testimonies from the Nakba. And while it mirrors what we're seeing today, it mirrors all the, crimes against humanity in terms of the targeting of civilians and people in shelters and in tents and refugee camps. The sexual violence is also not something that is new. We know that this is a practice, that the Zionist militias have applied since the Nakba, since 1947, and it's all well documented. Mind you, documented by Palestinian and even Israeli, even Zionist historians such as Benny Morris, who talks about the whole, using rape and sexual violence as a tool of genocide as well. So it's been horrible having to see the testimonies of my grandparents happening again in 2024, 2023. And definitely happening with in more intensity, more advanced, more technologically advanced, and quote unquote, as some European Western leaders would call Israeli practices, creative, when they described the whole pager attack on Lebanese civilians as well. So yes, it's exacerbated. It's more brutal. It's cruel, and it's more destructive. but still enjoys the same impunity that it has enjoyed since 1947. Imagine it's taken 14 months for the ICC to issue arrests, despite the ample, all the evidence that we have, all the documentation of war crimes that are happening every day in Gaza and the West Bank. It's taken 14 months for the ICC to issue warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. So I think, yes, this genocide is not new to Palestinians, but also genocide as a notion is not new to First Nation people or indigenous people around the world. And that's why I think you asked me a question like what keeps me going, what gives me strength. And I think it's the strength and the resilience of people who have lived experience. And that's what, when we talk about solidarity and why is it so, like, it's such a no-brainer for me. When I first landed on this continent 10 years ago, it was a no-brainer for a Palestinian who lived under occupation, who was born and grew up under occupation, and had that lived experience of what these power structures do to indigenous people, and how we talk about the ongoing nature of the Nakba or the genocide here as well, and how it manifests in different ways. So when you've lived that, of course it's a no-brainer that you're going to go and stand in solidarity with people who have gone through the same experience. And it's not even a decision sometimes that you make rationally. It's like, of course, yes, these are my people and this cause is my cause, and I will always stand with people who have lived experience with settler colonialism, with racism, with oppression. So I think this also, I'm mentioning this because this also is a source of strength for me, the resilience, but also the creativity in which indigenous people globally, but also on this continent more specifically, have managed to redefine the struggle, to reframe the struggle, to emphasize what their cause is about. 250 plus years on, and we're still talking about land back, and we're still talking about sovereignty and self-determination and what it means, and that's inspiring for me as a Palestinian who's mind you, the occupation in Israel is younger. The settler colonial project is younger compared to Australia, but I think we're seeing it at its worst manifestation. So I think that's inspiring for me to see that, yes, we can carry our struggles and our values, and we will keep passing on these values and traditions and cultures and languages that we hold so dear, and truth. So that's inspiring.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. It really makes me also think about Dr. Crystal McKinnon on a panel last year. She said that settler colonies learn violence from each other, but Indigenous people learn like the fight and like the strength from each other, and the way that we build up solidarity around that and learn how to fight for a better world together is really beautiful, and it just really made me think about that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dr. Crystal McKinnon. I think, and absolutely endorse everything that you just quoted. I think, look, settler colonial states actually rally in support of each other. We've seen that most recently with the foreign minister and the current Australian government standing. 20,000 Palestinians were killed, and then the government was still saying, last December, last year in 2023, the government was still saying Israel has the right to defend itself. So there was that, that whole solidarity on full display, where settler colonial projects jump into support and defend each other from actions but also from impunity. Like, it's just providing full impunity and sheltering them from any accountability. So we see that, we know that this is what they do, and that's all the more reasons why we as Indigenous, as a movement for freedom and justice and equality for all, we need to stick together as well, because for us to balance and when you think about who we're up against, the most powerful power structures globally, and it's not just settler colonials, but even oppressive regimes, right, around the world. So us, the movement for again, and that's how I define the movement for Palestine, is the movement for freedom, justice, equality, self-determination for all. And that's all the more reason why we need to stand in solidarity with each other, but also it's not that I'm standing in solidarity with a different cause. It's the same cause by the end of the day. So same values, same shared future, same shared values.
That's like so true. Like the Indigenous movements. Like, yeah, it is the same movement. Land back now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the next question I wanted to ask you was, I was really proud of the Melbourne Invasion Day, where so many people from your community came out in the streets in solidarity with blackfellas. And did you know that like people travelled from interstate to come because of the blackfellow and Palestinian solidarity element of Invasion Day? And also, like, I know heaps of blackfellas that have travelled interstate to come to a Free Palestine rally in Melbourne as well. So something about Wurundjeri country and the Wurundjeri country that fosters like so much movement building is really special. Like, what do you think and how do you feel?
I'm also extremely proud of that partnership that kind of took shape in that a joint rally with to commemorate Invasion Day and the genocide that occurred on this continent, but also what a like it just made sense that as this genocide is happening, we also connect to our local context and commemorate the genocide that has happened, and continue to manifest in different ways. So I think it was quite heartwarming to see the community show up. I'm very proud of the Palestinian community who came from different parts of the state to stand in solidarity and to emphasize that this date is significant, and to understand why it's significant for First Nation people here. But also, it was a moment of realization that it clicked, right? It clicked for so many people who the parallel of the First Nation and how settler colonial projects operates here versus in Israel. For many people, maybe the parallels and the links were not very visible before and were not very clear. But on that day, it was right in front of you. It's just right in your face. And people we can no longer, pretend, or there was no room for vagueness anymore. So of course, yes, Invasion Day, Palestinian community will be there because it's the Nakba Day for us. It's the equivalent of Nakba Day. And what does that mean in terms of standing in solidarity as a movement, and just linking all these dots together. So I'm very proud of all the Palestinian community who showed up. I'm also very proud of all the work that First Nation people have done, and in being so generous in sharing that space and sharing as well, that day, because that date is extremely significant. Like I know what it's like, right? I mean, we know what every Nakba, we know how we feel it, and we know what it's like to reflect on the losses. We know what it's like to reflect on the violence that occurred, and we know what it's like to reflect on, the injustice that continues to happen. So it's not an easy day for First Nations here. And just, that embrace that we were given by organizers such as yourself, Tarneen. Thank you so much for, and I remember those conversations that you and I were having in the lead up to Invasion Day in terms of how can we, I guess, for lack of a better word, give it the weight and the value and the manifestation that it deserves. So I'm very grateful for you and for your mob for embracing us, for giving us space, and for sharing that very significant date, which is extremely painful and crucial. And you just want to sit and reflect on your own pain, but so generously you also brought us in, and you've allowed heaps of space as well for Palestinians to express their grief and their pain, and that was done so beautifully together. And I think this is how solidarity looks like.
Yeah, I think that there's so many things that go into it, right? Like there was the conversations, like the back and forth conversations we're having, like, does the Sunday rally go ahead? Does it not go ahead? Like, what does that look, like all of these yarns that were happening behind the scenes that like relies on solidarity as well, like to negotiate and be just like being honest, but being like caring and loving to each other in the movement, and like trying to figure out like what's the best, like what should we do, and I think that was, yeah, a really beautiful moment that we got to have together as organizers, and like figuring out like what we need to do and what's best for right now, and how do we show respect to each other. Like, oh, I don't want to ask you to cancel like the Sound Day rally. Then you guys were like, no, like I think we have to. And just like the back and forth, and I was like, oh God, I remember like having chats with like Invasion Day crew, like in war, and I was like, I don't know. And we arrived at the point where you guys weren't going to have the rally, and like redirected people to the Invasion Day rally. And I remember just like being at Flinders Street Station, and I was just like bawling my eyes out because like there was just like drummers, and there was just like so many people, and like every speech that was made by black fella like included Palestinian people and like the solidarity we have without even being prompted. So I just, yeah, the work that we did together to make that happen, I think, yeah, was really beautiful. And I think because of the amount of, misinformation and disinformation about and and the state of affairs of black leadership right now, lots of, not lots, but a few First Nations leaders were talking about like standing in solidarity with Israel. And it was like a moment where there was so many black fellas out, and we're just like, no, we don't. We're here with Palestinians. And we had to, I guess, like prove that we as a community, particularly here in Melbourne, have solidarity with Palestinians and their fight and justice.
I think, look, I mean, just, reflecting on those conversations for us from our end, and I think it's unique to Wurundjeri country. I must agree with you. It was a no-brainer for us that, of course, we're not going to hold the Sunday rally on the weekend of Invasion Day. Like that's, I mean, everyone should actually, there's no point, like why would you have two rallies for the same cause? Does that make sense? Like this is Invasion Day, commemorating a significant event in history, which relate to what's happening at the moment as well. So how do we then make the best of, this, and this is an opportunity, once again, we talk about solidarity. How do we practice solidarity?
Yeah.
How do we practice what we preach? That was an opportunity to do that. So from our end, it was a no-brainer. Like, yeah, of course, there's no need for a Sunday rally, because on Friday or Saturday we would be, or whatever day we would decide, we would be still protesting settler colonialism and genocide, and with our First Nation siblings, brothers and sisters. So that was, yeah, and I do think it's a special Wurundjeri country, special in that respect.
100%.
Yeah.
Think about it. There's something about it that makes us all like have a bit more fire.
Yeah, there was another point that you mentioned that I would like to touch on, which is that that there's some black fella plus Israel solidarity, and that's also something to me that's a byproduct of settler colonialism as well.
100%.
And we have similar things going on as well in the Palestinian community, where they think, oh, I mean, what is being Australian, and how do I be a good Australian, and how do I fit in, and how do I, specifically if you think about people with refugee backgrounds whom, their homes or states or countries or whatever you want to call it, have been literally destroyed, and they can't return, and they think that the best way for them to localize is to actually assimilate in the settler colonial project. So I think and this is where our work is valuable. I think we still we shouldn't give up on these people, because by the end of the day, they are part of our community, and they are also victims of settler colonialism. So what's going on, that dynamic, we talk about there's different ways in which people under occupation or oppression resist or try to survive. So there's the logic of resistance or pushing back, and some people just think maybe the logic of survival is just to assimilate. So I think that's where, once again, we have a lot to do. And how do we bring our people, because they still are people by the end of the day, how do we keep talking to them and bringing them on and explaining actually that there is a better way for you to be in alignment, to live on stolen land and support, and show solidarity with First Nation people and still be in alignment with your own values as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it goes like for the same with like people in my community that say that they support Israel, right? Like there's just this like I think a lot of it in our community lies a lot with like religion and Christianity and like the people that do support Israel. And it's very much connected to that. And it's hard. Like I've had hard conversations with one of my family members even to be like, hey, like, that Palestinians are Indigenous, right? And unpacking that and having tough conversations with people that I love and care about to bring them to like a point where they're just like, oh, wait, we are the same and we're all fighting for justice and land back and freedom and liberation from settler colonialism, and that to align those values and that thinking like really like for one of my family members brought them along, and it was really rough one because it's been conversations I'd been having with this one family member for a long time, like probably since like 2016 or 17 I reckon. And it wasn't till in the last year that I was like, hey, like now it's your time. Like you need to wake up to yourself. Like it was frustrating. Um, but I was like, hey, like this is what's happening. Like you're really going to stand on this side of history in this moment. And it is, those hard conversations that we have to have with our community members. And what that does as well for us as organisers and campaigners, it makes us think critically about the way that we communicate with our community and bring people across the line, but also how to like share knowledge and build on the values that these like our community members already have, and to be like, hey, like it's like I know this is not what your values are,
Yeah.
but what you're and who you're supporting is telling me that a different story. But that's not, I don't believe that's who you really are, even though I don't have that much patience with everybody, I have to admit. But it does tighten like the tools for us as organisers and campaigners when we come up against our community members who are supporting things that you don't believe are in their values, right? And it makes us better communicators. And because we are relying on trying to get a message across to people that sits with them and changes their minds, and so that they can take action. And when we do that, it's like, wow, who else can we bring along with us? Like,
Yeah.
who else can we bring on this journey of like, fighting for freedom and justice? And yeah, I think it's bloody hard, but I think, yeah, it's one of the best things that you can do as an organizer and campaigner when there is that shared values and the Indigenous fight for freedom.
Yeah, and I think, look, I mean, there's so much good stuff and all this, the things that you just mentioned, but probably most importantly, that relates to the whole point that you made at the very beginning in terms of misinformation and disinformation, right? And how that, for instance, in this specific case, Zionism has managed to position itself as progressive, but also it doesn't even shy from using religion as well to claim the land that obviously does not belong to Zionists. So Zionism uses whatever tool that exists so that it can justify the land theft, and in that respect, so they use obviously religion, they use Judaism, but even Christianity as well. And that's a good point as well to make. I think right now that Zionism, you don't have to be Jewish to be Zionist. You can be, obviously, evangelical Christians are extremely Zionist. And if you think about now, like with some of the Abraham Accords, the normalization deals that we have, UAE, for instance, which is a Muslim country. So you can also be a Muslim Zionist in that respect, because Zionism is an ideology and it's not a religion. It's a political ideology. So it can be actually endorsed by, Jewish, Christian, Muslims, Hindus as well. We have, when you have nationalist movements as well. So I think that's an important point to make, that whole misinformation and disinformation exists. And then in terms of what, all these ideas that they have about Indigenous folks as well, and what Indigenous people do and what they don't, what they have the right to do, and what fights they are entitled to undertake, and what fights, so all of that stuff. And then we internalize it, right? It's also a byproduct of settler colonialism. Some of us internalize these ideas and biases that, and then we think, yeah, right, that makes sense. Palestinians are, this and that. First Nation people are, like, there's all these stereotypes that exist. And then I think that's where, and absolutely, I think it's important then our role in terms of speaking and communicating and raising awareness and connecting and bringing people together and doing that kind of work within our communities. And also building on the knowledge that exists, which is something that you mentioned. Like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's not that we have some kind of magical solutions, but and then there's people before us who have been doing this kind of work. How do we build on what they've achieved and take it, from one success to another, I guess. So I think we could potentially, as organizers, be learning. I mean, for me, everything is constant learning, and that's something that we need to do. How do we build on the success and the work that those who were here before us have done? How do we respect that and give it, credit as well, and learn from it, and then keep building on it? And how do we, get out of the bubble? Like, I love the bubble. It's so comfy, right?
So comfortable.
It's just,
I could float around in it all day.
right. But by the end of the day, what is our impact if we just kind of, that's our territory that we operate within? We're not really, what kind of impact, what is the added value that we're bringing to, what value are we adding to these very important causes that we have? And it's a cause that is, it's just, right? It's a just cause. It's a cause, both causes, I can talk about, which eventually they're kind of the same. What we're saying, that it's about, rights of Indigenous people to live peacefully, freely, equally on their lands, right? How do we protect Indigenous existence, be it here on this continent or in Palestine? How do we protect it? And how do we allow for those in the specific context of Palestine who want to return? How do we allow for the return? How do we protect Indigenous existence, and how do we ensure its continuity and access to the land, to their land, to their ancestral land? And to do that, I think we do need to speak to, yes, those family members who are not exactly, they haven't had the privilege of, meeting Tarneen maybe and working closely with Tarneen. So, they lived a different life, and they went to different schools, or, or different, who knows, right? So we have to give people the benefit of the doubt, and we need to constantly be having these conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just, like even when someone, I'm laughing because I shouldn't laugh, but when someone said to me, like, why does Palestinian solidarity and Blackfellow Palestinian, or it means, someone said something like, really mean that doesn't mean anything, and I was like, well, how are we even connected? And I was like, mate, like, really? Okay, cool. Like,
Yeah.
let me, and I think, particularly in the beginning, when Like there was lots of questions like from the media and
Mm.
people like in the public that were just like, why does like what does like this mean and why does it matter to you or whatever? And I remember there was an inquest into the death of Joshua Kerr
Mm.
here in Victoria. And he died in Port Phillip Prison, and it's a private prison, and it's operated by it was operated by the same company that would manage like Palestinians getting in and out of Israel and into Gaza. And they're so interconnected and they're so dangerous. And like Josh wasn't the only one who passed away at that prison, and in like lots of blackfellas have passed away in those private prisons. Not passed away, murdered or killed, and
Yeah.
it just blows my mind that people think, oh, they're not connected at all when we have their companies operating here that have like imprisoned Palestinians in Palestine. And that's like, this is where so much of their technology is used here on blackfellas here. The same like companies making money off it, and these big corporations that continue to harm us as blackfellas harm Palestinians in Palestine as well. And it just grinds my gears that people don't think about it and like don't think about the amount of investment and think that it's got nothing, there's the separation. But like Israel is also causing harm to First Nations people here and benefiting from that. This is how, settler colonial states are being in solidarity with each other.
It's not just the political solidarity that they give each other, like
Mm.
internationally, right? It's also actual like tools and exchange of expertise and trainings and military tech and whatnot. So yeah, it's there's thing is that people don't know, and
Mm.
it's not this kind of information is not made publicly available for people.
Yeah.
And it's even, when you try and you want to, like, for instance, dig deeper, and it's not easy to access this kind of information. So it's well kept under the radar. So I think there's an element of just kind of unearthing all these evidence and making it, again, visible and
Mm.
available for people to access. But yeah, I agree with you. It's pretty much the same ideology and the same strategy and the same tactics and the same tools that they use.
For sure. One thing I will just jump in and say, the funniest thing was being there with NASA, Mashni, and I carry masking tape with me in my backpack in case I need to like label something, in case I need to like stick something up, like whatever. Like it's just I have it carry it around in my backpack. And at this point in time, I was carrying a masking tape in my backpack to label things. Anyway, we were at the inquest, the coronal inquest here in Victoria, and it's managed by G4S. Like the security part is managed by G4S, and they took my masking tape and they confiscated it and they put it in this like little clear snap lock bag or whatever. And I was just like, remember unpacking it, and it had like G4S on the bag, and I held it up and I was like, oh my God, this is hilarious. Worried about sticky tape, these guys. I'm like, and we're just all eating together, like me, NASA, April, and we're just having, and my mum actually, and we're all just like laughing together because can you imagine these guys? Oh wow, this person has sticky tape, but like we're out here. Um,
You're gonna stick stickers on them until they just, stop breathing.
I know.
Look, everything we do, anything we do as Indigenous people is vilified, is perceived as a threat. Like the example that you just given, it's a tape, right? But we anything that we do is going to be perceived because this is, again, like going back to the whole fundamental, I guess, not values, because I don't think settler colonialism has values, I think to the core guiding principle of settler colonialism, which is the logic of extermination, right? So they really want to exterminate us. They're not joking. And then they're waging a war on on the entirety of our existence. The fact that we exist and we carry tape in our bags is perceived as a threat to them. You know, the fact that we just breathe is a threat to them because they are very exclusionary. It's a very exclusionary project, and it cannot coexist actually as much as they would like to say, oh, let's coexist. They can't coexist with others. So they have to annihilate and exterminate.
We have to, remember that in everything that we do. Do we have to remember that the threat is always there? You know?
Yeah.
Even though we are here, like that it's always there. I might ask you my fourth question, and this is so funny because I knew that I only need 4 questions, like it will be fine. We will chat away.
Yes, fourth question.
Fourth question. Who has been your favorite Palestinian speaker or Blackfella speaker? Who's moved you in the last 14 months or ever, really?
Wow. I mean, I think, it's really hard to choose just one. Every time I listen to speeches made by, by mob or by First Nation Indigenous people during the Sunday rally, I'm moved to tears. I can't believe I feel like, oh my God, like how, the generosity and the support, I don't take that for granted. I don't take that for granted, especially coming from people who have lived experience. And because I know what it does to you. And I know that sometimes it's really hard to show up for your own cause, for yourself, for your own community, let alone showing up for others, quote unquote others. So I don't take that for granted. So every time, and look, every speaker brings a different perspective, right? There hasn't been 2 speeches that were the same. And even sometimes people who speak in, like in different rallies, they don't say the same thing. It's always different. There's so much nuance and there's so much diversity in every speech that I literally enjoy, and I'm moved by every speaker, Palestinian or, First Nations, Indigenous. I think what moves me the most is that diversity and the fact that we are still showing up for each other. 14 months on. I mean, mind you, we're all tired, exhausted, and drained. But this, again, going back to that very first thing that you mentioned, that first question of what gives me power and what inspires, is this, that we're still doing this and we're still showing up, and, upholding our moral duties as humans to speak up against these atrocities and say that, no, there's not going to be business as usual.
Yeah, for sure. I just think as well, like, I'm super surprised, but also not surprised that people are not saying the same thing. I'm genuinely surprised because it's like, it's hard work if it's like the same person writing lots of different speeches, and it just tells you that, like, people care so much about, like, this cause, but also about the words and like the values behind that and how to bring people together. It's really beautiful because for people that don't know, it's politicians go around and like have the same speech and do it like 10 times.
Yes, that's so uninspiring, by the way. It's boring.
Yeah.
But maybe, you know what? I mean, if I had to choose and pick one person, obviously Professor Gary Foley, Uncle Gary. Every time, I mean, I remember the first couple of months where we're still in shock. Imagine, and we were still in disbelief, and at the political level, we're saying Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel has the right to defend itself. And it's targeting hospitals and babies in incubators. And then every time Uncle Gary spoke, he spoke to that point.
I love him. And I really wanted to, that part of that question was to like bring out Professor Foley.
Yeah.
because he does move so many people.
Yes, yes.
His speeches every time moves me with like his like just the like his intelligence, but like his care for the world and his bravery and
Yeah.
his like he's just incredible. And I remember at the Nakba rally in October,
Mm.
I said to him, I'm tired and I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
He was just like, what the fuck are you burnt out for? You're only 30 something years old. I'm only starting to be burnt out now. And I was like, well, things were different back then, all right? People used to write letters to each other.
Oh, this is gold.
And
Yeah.
now it's like like people can just call you whenever and talk to you whenever. And he was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm just like, oh my God. This is so funny. I'm getting ripped by him and I kind of need to wake up to myself. But he's got so much energy and he's got so much like fight.
Yeah.
And in his like it's in every part of his body, like I can't get over it. He
And
goes to
someone like him, right? I mean, it's yeah, like we're like, oh, we're tired and burned out. He's like, what? He's still there, on the platform every Sunday, giving these like stellar speeches, right?
Mhm.
Um, and inspiring people. So definitely an inspirational figure, and so much knowledge and so much expertise and so much to learn from. And I mean, absolutely. I think, look, for me, it's just been amazing
Mm.
that the leadership as well is there. It's not just the young organizers and activists,
Mm.
but it's the leadership is there, and
Mhm.
that is so because we have a leadership crisis. As Palestinians, we don't have leadership,
Mm.
and mind you, it's I mean, Israel as a settler colonial project also played a part in this to ensure that we don't have
Mm.
proper leadership, and then but also to weaken the leadership that we have. And anyways, but I think so. And for me, seeing Uncle Gary saying these words, it's just how because we're politically orphans. We
Mm.
and then suddenly there's this amazing, wow, like I'm lost for words. So there's this amazing guy with history, with professor like Uncle Gary Foldy there, and he is talking about my cause. I'm like, oh God, tears. Like I couldn't hold my tears. I it gave me. I felt held, like I felt like someone has our backs,
Mm.
which is not, you can't say, like, no Palestinians feel that they they have that kind of support from leadership.
Like it is like I've learned a lot. Like it's as well. I think that people listening will be thinking, oh yeah, like it's really difficult to find leadership in our communities, and I think particularly when there's like it's been so many things stripped away,
Yeah,
and we have lots of and like also the displacement, like for Palestinians. And even though black fellows have experienced displacement, it's like not moving continents,
yeah,
you know? So in that way, it's like different, but the same. And I feel like we have a huge leadership issue as well. And there is like obviously leaders, but I think there's not many that like Gary Foley where you can be like, oh,
mm,
he gets it. And,
yeah,
you know, like down to the blood and bones of
yeah,
who we are, he gets it. And there's something really beautiful and powerful about that. I think particularly for men, right? Like there
yeah,
is this beauty of him and like black men being I don't know, there's not many black men in the movement anymore.
yeah,
But having Professor Foley around and seeing him doing the work that he does is really moving. And the way that he backs Black women and
Yeah.
Palestinian women is really moving as well. Like, he sees the strength of what we do, and it's not like it's weird. Like, it's not that I want to be seen by men, right? But
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
being seen as like by an elder who's been here and done it all before is really beautiful, and like I really appreciate him and the way he makes us feel held and seen.
Absolutely. And you know that legacy. I mean, I'm thinking, how do we protect his legacy as well? And
Mm,
you know, the way that he conducts his advocacy or activism or whatever, you know, whatever we want to call it, like his how he fights for his cause. How do we protect that and mainstream it? How, you know, how do we create more Gary Foleys? And then, I mean, our Gary Foleys are in prison. You know, like if I think about the equivalent of Gary Foleys in the Palestinian context, they're in prison, or sadly martyred, like, or you know, have been assassinated. So how do we, again, because how important and valuable it is to have someone like Uncle Gary, you know, leading and creating space and empowering, you know, making people like myself feel that they're seen. And you know, it's something that you mentioned as well, and it's not because it's not, yeah, I again, to the point, like, it's not I want to be seen by men, but it's what kind of men I, you know, like, it's an elder and it's a leader and it's someone who has been there, has done it, and you know,
mm.
yeah, so much to think about.
Nice to think about.
Yeah.
That was a nice ending with Professor Foley, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Noura, for joining us or joining me in conversation.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Tarneen. I can't wait for our next yarn.